JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So we're continuing on the calculation of loan forgiveness on the PPP. And so I've got videos in this playlist. Go to www.jjthecpahelp.com. Excuse me. And I've got a playlist, I've got a page, PPP, and I got a page called Forgiveness. And so on that, I have the worksheets, I have Excel schedules, I have a list of documents of what's included in the forgiveness, and pretty much everything I think you would need. Again, I don't get any email from you. It's not a trick for a free seminar or a funnel in any way. It's just information for you. Here's why I don't believe you can rig the system. Because the first thing to achieve the forgiveness is that you would spend at least 75% on payroll and no more than 25% on the other expenses outside of the payroll cost. So see other videos on that. So you have to do that. And then this behind me right here would only reduce down the forgiveness. And basically what it would ferret out is if you just gave a bunch of raises or people left and then you gave raises. That's what's going to be ferreted out in this. Okay. So you ready? A little bit of a mind bender here was for me. So a couple of things to note. This is directly from the law, and I have an Excel spreadsheet that literally breaks out the law line by line with numbers, line by line, that you can then put your numbers into. So we're going to define three different things, and just don't try and figure out why you need to know these things yet. We just want to digest these three items. So just relax your mind. And the only reason I'm saying that is that it's a mind bender. So the way we're going to avoid minds being bent is I'm guiding you. So just all we're doing is defining 1, 2, and 3. Don't figure out why we're defining it. Okay? Not yet, at least. So the first thing we have to define is what's the average number of employees during the covered period, which is the 8 weeks. Okay, so the reason I have an 8 and a 7 and a 9 is that I've run some math here for you, okay? As an example, which this matches what is in the worksheet on my that community service website. Now I want you to notice something here. The key here is average number of employees, okay, over the 8 weeks. Okay, so whatever your 56 days are. And then the second thing that you're going to have to just figure out is what was the average, again, number of employees, and look at that, from 2/15/19 to 6/30/19. That's not a mistake. Okay? They're wanting you to compare this to basically the overall period that the CARES Act is applying as an overall covered period, not this covered period, okay? There's different terminology for each section of the law, and they're talking about a covered period and they define it in each section of the law. And this is in 1106 of the law, and that covered period is clearly 8 weeks, okay? So you want the average number of employees from 2/15/19, 6/30/19, and you want the average number of employees, okay, from 1/1/20. Why did I say 20? That got, okay, I should say 1/1/20, okay, to 2/29/20. So the first 2 months of 2020. So you need to figure out the average number of employees, right? So if in the first 4 weeks you have this many employees, and in the last 4 weeks of it you have this many employees, right? You're figuring out the average. And probably really you're just taking the payroll periods. Most of us would be having 4 payroll periods. So what were the number of employees in each payroll period, right, to come up with your average. And then what it says is you're gonna divide, and you have the choice of, you get to choose which one, which obviously you choose the better one. So if there was an average of 8 employees, okay, during the covered period, right, that's the 8 weeks, there were 8 employees, and then there was 7 employees on average on this period back in 2019, right? So you take 1 divided by 2, which is down here, okay? 1 divided by 2, okay? I don't mean the number 1 divided by the number 2. I'm saying the first line item divided by the second line item, 8 divided by 7 is 114.29%. Or you take 1 divided by 3, and that's 88.89%. And so you get to use the better number, which would be this, okay? All that means is that of the money that was spent, and properly, whatever dollars that was in the proper categories over the 8-week period, the total amount, okay, would be all forgiven. So what I want you to note this is that what if this was a 7? Okay? So if these both things were 7s, you'd still be, right? You'd still be here. You'd be A-okay. But what if both of these were a 9? Okay. So you get it, it's a 9. Okay. Well, if both of them were a 9, you'd be dealing with 88.89% if both of these were a 9. Okay. And what that means is, even if you spent the money, quote unquote, perfectly, meaning you go, hey, banker, right here I have payroll that made up 75%, right? The payroll being gross payroll, the employer match, the employer paid health insurance, and the SUTA. That's the payroll cost that goes into the 75%. And you say, look at right here, here's all my payroll records. I spent 75% of the loan on that. And then here's the rent and the mortgage interest and the utilities. And I spent a perfect amount on that. So here you go, all forgiven. Check it out, right? And this is the part that if you were, trying to somehow strategize, you'd get burned, because even if you spent all of it perfectly, if this is what your math ends up, only 88% of that will be forgiven, okay? So stated another way, let's say your max loan is $100,000 and you spend $75,000 on payroll costs and $25,000 on the other costs. And you're like, I'm home free. So it worked, JJ. I paid a little extra here. I paid some hazard pay here. I gave this person a raise. I was able to get there because I spent more, hired another person. So we got there. Okay, well, you got there based on the numbers, okay? But even though you got there on the numbers, you would only have $88,890 of your $100,000 forgiven, right? So almost 12,000, well, a little over 11,000 not forgiven. And you can't say, well, that's not fair. Well, it is fair from the standpoint of when you take into account that it was free money, okay? Remember that. It was free money. So let's say you spend it all and you go, well, I got to come up with 11 grand. We got 2 years to come up with it. But what you have to remember is you were able to give a raise. You were able to hire somebody new with that money but that money wasn't intended for those things. It wasn't intended for a raise. It wasn't intended for someone to come on board and increase your numbers. It was not intended for that. It wasn't. So even though you hit your numbers, okay, if you're, monkeying with them, this is where it's going to come out in the wash and go, well, you didn't do it the way that it's supposed to because of your head counts, right? And then, we can go into, and I say it with, all due respect, but, excuse me, I've already heard it, not quite frankly, not from my clients, but what I'm hearing is, well, that's not fair. And I've got this reason, and I've got this story, and that happened, and my uncle's kid's, stepson, okay? Or, well, such and such needed a job, Hey, I'm a great employer. I gave someone else a job. Well, I couldn't help it that, everybody went on employment. Well, I couldn't help it that we were closed and everybody was on employment. Because remember this, if you don't have those expenses, then you're not spending it on other things. If you don't have the payroll, and in the 8 weeks you're not spending it on payroll, then at the end of the 8 weeks, you have that money sitting there, right? It's just sitting there. You can do one of two things, hand it right then or pay it over a 2-year period. So then to say, well, that's not fair though, that doesn't even compute in my mind, right? And I'm just saying, like, you were given money to cover payroll. You didn't have any payroll. Okay, well then give the money back. It's not a punishment. It's, you didn't have what it was intended for. You still would have been able to use the rent, utilities, interest, right? Insurance. So you still would have been able to, that would have been a part of it, up to the 25%. So it can't be seen as, well, are you kidding me? I spent it perfectly. Well, but you didn't spend it perfectly. It's not even a criticism. It would just be a fact. Now, you may say, well, but JJ, come on. Are you kidding me? Here's what was going on from 2:15 to 6:30 and 19, don't you remember? And here's what was going on the first 2 months of 2020, right? And then this happened, and coronavirus, and people left, and our business was closed. That's not fair. So the first thing to know is that when it comes to the forgiveness, pretty quick here, I'm not going to actually answer any more questions. Now, I may put stuff on YouTube of what I know, but I'm not going to specifically answer any questions, because the only person that can answer your questions related to the loan forgiveness is the bank that's going to actually determine that. So I might be able to give you a guide or something, right? But I've said in earlier videos, banks, when they were actually calculating up loans, I'm like, well, you can't actually do that, but okay. So they put that in and counted it, which will backfire at the end. Those loans won't be forgiven, because they don't even have the expenses that offset it to make it forgivable. Okay? There's no reason to go through those, because I got other videos about them. But all I'm saying is this, that the banks are going to have to go with what their interpretation is of the SBA. I'm sure the guidelines from the SBA will come out. There might be some further clarifications. And I know we can say, well, that's not fair. We need to know up front. True. Right? But we're in a crisis mode. They came up with this money like as fast as can be, right? This law went into play on a Friday, and by the next Friday, they were taking applications, and by the next Monday, they were paying out money. They paid out $349 billion. Unfortunately, not everybody got it that should have. Okay, so I want you to think too, and I'm just speaking in general here. I want you to stand next to Jason. I want you to stand next to Guy. Okay, I want you to stand next to the number of people that I've interacted with on YouTube And I want you to tell them that it's not fair that you got $100,000 and you spent it on payroll, but only 88.89% of it is forgivable. Because these are individuals, chokes me up, that had all their documents ready to go, handed them in on the 3rd, maybe one of them on the 6th, were in line basically first, kept employees on, told employees don't go on unemployment, boom, we're in line. The bank said, we're gonna get this PPP money. And then they were told yesterday, hey, it ran out, we're so sorry, we didn't get to you, and you don't have any money. Okay? So what did those business owners have to do during the 8 weeks when you were handed money as a grant? Okay? So we should change our tune a little, because I am hearing relief from a lot of people too. I am. But when I'm hearing discussion about the forgiveness is when I'm hearing already a little bit of panic about, well, I got to make sure it's all forgiven. I got to strategize. So what you're doing is wasting the government's money is what that comes down to. And that's not what it's intended for, period. The end. You're breaking the law. It's a criminal act. Okay. If you have all the same employees the whole entire time, and now you have your PPP money, okay, and you hire someone new, okay, technically you should not be using PPP money to pay that person. They're not included. Giving yourself a raise is a criminal act. Okay, now you may give yourself a raise and then you don't use PPP money. Let me clarify that. You can give employees hazard pay and it not be PPP money. But if you think you're going to get away with it, you got away with a crime. Like, really let that sink in for a minute. I want also it to sink in that if you got $100,000, you got your information in, your bank got after it, right? Right? You got the lucky ticket, you were at the Willy Wonka chocolate factory and you open it up and you're like, boom, I got the gold ticket. So remember that there are those that didn't even get the 100K. They didn't even get the opportunity to try and think about strategizing. They didn't even get the money to try and think about how does this work and how much of it's forgiven. They didn't get the money to make payroll on Monday. You did. So just use it as what it's intended for. And, with all due respect, I'm not going to answer any questions about this strategy. Okay, I'm just going to refer you to the playlist. I'm just saying in general, right? So if my clients are listening to this, I don't even really necessarily mean you, other than I mean everybody. Okay, but I've been going live every day at 4 p.m., sometimes up to 6 hours, answering questions and answering emails and then comments. Right, I've been averaging 3 to 4 hours of sleep trying to get answers out there. But I'm not going to give any answers related to, can I do this and can I do this? My answer is going to be, go watch my videos, period. And then if that doesn't work, I'll say, go ask your banker. Okay, and if you're like, well, but I need that information related to payroll, then go to your payroll company and get it. And it's not that I don't want to be helpful. It's that this is all completely out of my hands. Okay, it's completely out of my hands. And I mean for everybody that I'm providing help to, right? From Alaska to California to New York to Idaho to Florida and all the wonderful places around the country, okay? To all of them, it's the bank that has the final decision. That's who you really need to ask. You ask them, can I pay hazard pay? You ask them, if I have employees that go on unemployment, can I rehire or bring on temporary staff? Okay, you ask them. Okay, I mean, there's no actual reason for me to answer it because they're the judge. Court is in session, right? So it just wouldn't even be appropriate for me to speculate. Now, I'll do videos, right, on it, and based on what I know and what the SBA, and all I can do is say, hey, here's the law. But in terms of can I, could I, should I, you need to talk to your banker. Well, hey, I need that information, okay? The average head count and all that stuff, it's not anything specifically that my firm has, okay? I may have access to payroll records, but I do not know your head counts, okay? Your payroll company can help you with that, or just think back, or I don't know, whatever. But see, how's the bank gonna know? They're gonna need something from you to verify that. And so what I'm getting at is I don't really want any of the liability, number one. And don't get me wrong, but I don't want to participate in strategies. Now, I know that the question may be, well, it's not a strategy, JJ. I just want to make sure I do it right. Well, it's just like I said, well, this is how you do it right. What is it that you need, okay? You know what the 75% is. You know what your average monthly is, right? You know, okay, I had 6 employees, now I have 5, I get to replace one. Yeah. Well, do I get to pay that person more? No, because you're looking at the overall cost of the salary. So if you have 6 employees and 4 of them are on unemployment and you want to replace them, don't just replace them for forgiveness. What's the point of that other than if you need them? So here's the thing. Grandpa gave you $20 to go to the movies, to have some popcorn and some licorice and a Slurpee, right? Or you can get a Coke or whatever, right? But Grandpa said, hey, here's money to go to the movies. Go enjoy yourself. So we can't, on the way to the movies, pop into the athletic store and pick up a new sack of socks. And then go back and say, Grandpa, I decided I didn't need to see the movie, so I bought some socks. What do you think Grandpa's gonna say? Like, what? I gave you money to go to the movies. I didn't give you money to get socks. Okay? Now let's say that you go to the movies and you get in on the matinee. Okay? You wouldn't tell the person, oh, no, I want to pay full price. I want to pay the higher price. I don't want to pay the matinee. Why would you do that? You want Grandpa to get less change? Right? If you go up to the concession, they're like, sorry, we don't have any popcorn ready to go, and so all we got for you is licorice and Slurpees. And you're like, well, then I better get 2 licorices, throw some M&Ms in there too. Okay? I'm not going to be able to eat all of it, but I want to make sure that I spend all this money. You wouldn't do that. Why would you do that? You want snacks for the movie, right? Not snacks for tonight and tomorrow. Okay? You got Grandpa's money. It's a gift. And Grandpa said, hey, bring me back the change. So you go to the movies, you get in the matinee, whatever they have, you got enough, you're enjoying the movie, you got it, and you have some change left over, you got a couple of bucks left over. Okay? You're still knowing that you're going to go back and talk to Grandpa. And Grandpa's going to say, oh, you got $2 left? Yeah, I'll take it. But, if there's something that you need now, you can go ahead and you can have that $2 and, just pay me back that $2 sometime in the next couple years. That's what this is. Until the movie's over, you can only spend it on going to the movies. There is literally no reason to demand from the person, you want to pay regular price, don't give me the matinee price. There's no reason to get to the counter and buy extra M&Ms because you're in a panic to make sure that you spend all of Grandpa's money. Grandpa's just like, hey, go have a good time, get what you need. So you go have a good time, you get what you need, boom, you wouldn't think twice. You wouldn't be like, oh wow, the matinee, now I have extra and I'm gonna buy more M&Ms. The good thing is, Grandpa didn't say, well, it's 75% max on the movie ticket and 25 max on the snacks and, right? So just think of it that way. And so I'm just trying to bring a message of calmness. I'm trying to bring a message of, let's not go into hyperdrive trying to figure out now how we spend it. And let's do a strategy here. Because even if that's due, you had the money. And let's remember Jason and Guy and all the other, it's got to be 1 million businesses that didn't get the money. Okay? They would love to be in a position where they got 100,000 and only basically 89,000 got forgiven. They would love that opportunity. They would just have loved it. All right. So there's 2 other aspects to this, and I'm not going to go through the board. What I need you to do is, if you want to go through, there's another opportunity for reduction, right? There's another opportunity for reduction. And then this famous, but if you have a head count by June 30, here's how this works. Okay. I'm just going to tell you that I've got it all laid out in a spreadsheet for you. Okay. You can walk through the math yourself. I don't need to walk you through it. Just go to that worksheet. You'll be able to work it through. Maybe at a later date, I'll do it. Okay. But just know you're kind of running another scenario, just comparing salaries. Okay. And then there is another scenario. It's like, oh, you replace some. You still have to spend all the money. You still can't overspend. Okay. But there's a little caveat in there. It's like, well, if you do rehire after, but it's not, oh, I didn't spend any money, but I hired after, and now I have extra forgiven. No, this is to be used during the 8 weeks. So in closing, right, if you have questions about this, you really need to ask your bank. And I'm assuming soon, they're going to come up with some kind of formula that you can just pop all that information in. You're going to know these 2 things. You're going to know your average number of employees during that time, average number of employees during this time. This is to be determined because you haven't gotten all the way through your 8 weeks, right? But you're going to know what those 2 things are. You might be able to project, the number of employees. And by the way, this is full-time equivalent, right? Full-time equivalent. If you have 2 people and they both work 20 hours a week, that'd be 1 full-time equivalent. So if you have questions, just, go to your bank, right? If you just spend on what you need, you're probably going to be A-okay. And then if you're extra worried about it, I'm just kind of being a broken record. Ask your bank. They're ultimately going to be the one. And even if it's not about this, it's, hey, is this a utility? It's this loan count. All I can tell you is the law. So I can tell you, the law just says rent. The law just says utilities. The law says mortgage interest in the business name. The law says interest in the business name, right? So if it's, well, hey, so my car, I'm writing it off in the business, but it's not in the business name. Do I get to write off the interest? Ask the bank. Bank may say, oh yeah, no worries. Next bank's like, no, not going to count. Okay. You say, oh, well, now what if I pay hazard pay, and then what if I do this? Ask the bank. Okay, one bank may be like, oh yeah, we'll work that stuff out, Next bank's like, no. But I will tell you this, all the banks have to do the ratios. The ratios is not about friendship and we'll let it slide. It's just hardcore numbers. It's hardcore. Here's what you spend. Here's the head counts. You do the math, that's what it is. Okay? Doesn't matter, it's your best buddy that you play golf with forever. And then I just want you to remember this at the end, okay? And I'm sure you won't. But don't find yourself saying, that's not fair, I only had 89,000 forgiven, right? Do not allow yourself to think that. There's nothing negative about any of this. There should be nothing stressful about this. And if you really can't handle the stress, you shouldn't have gotten the PPP monies. Okay, if this is keeping you up at night, and what about this, and what about this, then you shouldn't have got it, because this was meant to be a reliever to help you with your expenses. Okay, the biggest expenses in most businesses is payroll and rent, right? Your fixed costs. Government saying, hey, here's a grant for that. right? I mean, even if they said, hey, every business in America is getting 10 grand. That's what the EIDL was supposed to be. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you would subscribe. If you got any value out of this and you haven't subscribed, all I'm asking is one click. Even if you have to log in, I'd appreciate it if you just do that extra effort. Log in, subscribe. You'll also get then notifications if you turn it on of when I'm getting new videos out. I've got this playlist that is forgiveness. And then also on jjthecpahelp.com, there's a page called PPP. There's a page called forgiveness. It's all in there. There's the law, right? So really, if you have questions and you're like, well, the banker's busy and this and that, then go to that I've provided. Watch the videos that I've provided. If you're like, well, JJ, can you do a video though on those last two parts? Maybe next week I'll have time to do that. But the bottom line is what do you really need to know that for? You don't even know what you've spent yet because it's based on that, right? Some of the salary amount is based on what'd you do. And if you want to go like, well, but I need to know it in advance. Well, I've got a beautiful Excel spreadsheet there for you. And literally line by line is the law to help you really break it down. And it's just a math problem, 5th grade math, maybe a 10th grade math problem, okay? So just work through the numbers, okay? And as of April 17th, gas, electric, water, landline, internet. Can I? You should just already know the answer is no, but the answer just needs to be given by the bank. All right, hey, enough on all that. I just want to make sure that we're all keeping in mind how wonderful this is. It's great. I know we're in stressful times otherwise, and so sometimes it's hard to, or it's easy to forget, right? It's easy to forget all the other stress that's going on, and the doors, and when are we going to open them, and all that good stuff. But don't find yourself complaining about that. And if you're concerned, can I do this? Then don't do it. Then don't do it, right? Because if you just go, I got 80 grand and I spent some money on rent and some utilities and it's not up to 25% and I didn't know what to do on the payroll, so I'm just gonna give it all back. You can do that. Not having it forgiven is not the goal of this. That's not the goal of this. The goal is not, I gotta do whatever it takes so that it's all forgiven. The goal of this is, what do you need? Spend on that. Do you have some left over? Here's some ways to kind of make an even playing field. It wasn't meant to be a windfall, and in fact, that SBA said that. This isn't meant to be a windfall. It's meant to be, hey, you got expenses, we're gonna cover those because you don't have money coming in. All right, hey, guess what? You've never met a CPA quite like me.